Welcome back. Episode 3, Beyond the Red and Blues. We talked a little bit last time about, pre-employment stuff like that. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what you would expect going into patrol training for the first time, both from like an officer's perspective, like if you were going to get into that, and also from the public's perspective, so that way you can know what we went through and what they do go through to become fully patrol trained.
Yeah, in this episode, we're going to try to cover pretty much the early stages of your patrol training, what the expectations are, what are some of the biggest struggles that new trainees go through, and kind of tips and tricks that we see on how to improve on these mistakes. We can start out radio, probably one of the biggest fears that I think a lot of trainees have, just getting comfortable talking on the radio. I would say the vast majority are very, very shy or timid when it comes to it. And it's okay to make mistakes. Just get on there, get the practice, start making those mistakes early. So that way, come your later phases, you start sounding like a pro.
Yeah, and something I think a lot of people don't know, and I think this would depend on departments too. I think maybe smaller departments would be different, but with larger ones, for us, we had 2 radios.
Mm-hmm.
And I think almost nobody knows that. One radio is talking to like your local units in the field with you. And then you have another one that's more of your dispatcher downtown. Like if you need a helicopter or dogs or something, you can request that and they'll talk to the whole county and see who's available and who can come help. Whereas the other radio is just your partners talking amongst yourselves, the dozen of you or whoever's working.
Knowing that helps, but a lot of it is confidence. If you know your radio codes and you know the general verbiage, I think talking, it just becomes smoother and smoother as you go on. So that practice needs to start now. You kind of start learning that in the academy, those radio codes and the basics. But once you get out to patrol, then now you're using it in real life and everyone is actually starting to hear you. Every radio is a little different from agency to agency. Some are more open than others. With ours, it has a busy tone. So most of the time, no one's even hearing you. You're just talking to a dispatcher, and that's kind of it. Knowing that, I think, helps calm a lot of nerves, but it's still just sitting next to your FTO. I understand it's nerve-wracking. So one thing that we recommend that does help is just practicing talking out loud on your drives to and from work. Start practicing that radio traffic, just saying it out loud, getting the repetitions as much as possible. And if you mess up, then hold yourself accountable and start over. A lot of it just comes down to reps, just doing it over and over and over and over and doing it right. So make sure that if you make a mistake, start over and don't just allow yourself to be sloppy.
Yeah. And back to what I was saying about like 2 radios, like one radio, I could be talking to Zach, like, hey, I need you on the north side of the location. And then with the other radio, I'm saying, hey, I need a helicopter or whatever, back and forth. But also, some departments, you mentioned radio codes, some just use plain English. I think that's pretty rare though. I think most use codes to at least, some extent. But sometimes you're so amped up and, the emotions are high. It's a really hot call and you just got to talk plain English. It is what it is. Like you got to get the information out. You got to tell people where you need them, and you need to tell them now. Like the seconds count sometimes if it's a really serious call. And you don't have time to, if you forgot what the code is, and it even happens when, even intermediate or veteran officers, they'll just forget. Like especially, I had like an active shooter call once. Sounded super legit. It was 2 people with guns in a parking lot at a school, and they were like going towards the back of the school. Everyone's freaking out. Everyone was rolling hard too, rightfully so. And it was my call. That's another thing. If you guys don't know, one unit is assigned the handle is what we called it, like the person who is in charge of the call, other than, the sergeant who's going to supervise. And then everyone else is an assisting unit. So I was tasked to be the handling officer. So I was telling my units where I wanted them. It sounded really serious. We got there. It was actually a bank. It wasn't a school, but they had the word school in the name of the bank. Didn't even know it existed. I had been in the location, patrolling that area for like 3 years, including some guys have been there almost 10 years. They were like, I had never heard of this bank before. Maybe it's a new thing and maybe it just popped up. I don't know. But it had school in the title. So everyone was freaking out. Everyone thought it was a school. It sounded like a school. And it was just, what was it? Like they were like 15 or 16 and they had airsoft guns in the parking lot and they were just shooting at each other for fun. That's all it was. Thank God. But You never know. It could be something legit, and if it is, you need to know radio. And like I said, two radios is tough sometimes. Most apartments, I think, only have one, especially for the smaller ones, but still tough, and you got to know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that kind of goes into like the radio really is important because in incidents like that, there is a lot of communication going on at once and a lot of coordination going on at once. So, kind of like how we talked about, you're talking to multiple people at once. You're trying to coordinate with the dispatchers on what maybe you have or what you're doing action wise. And then you're trying to talk to your partners to say, hey, I need units over here. I need units over here. I need units to maybe start looking elsewhere. And then maybe you're also simultaneously setting up a team to go clear out this bank or location. So it is important that radio is kind of already difficult in itself when you're first learning, and that stress definitely doesn't help. So then you start thinking way more than you should, and you start forgetting, okay, I have to start coordinating all these different things. And it is really easy to get lost in that radio communication. And you have to realize, like, while all this is going on, he's probably standing outside of the bank now trying to deal with the bank. So the radio is just a very, very small part, as stressful as it can be, that you have to get down, and it needs to be fluid. And it's just a tool. Just talk, just like as if you're talking to them on the phone, trying to get them to come do whatever it is that you need them to do. So it is important to try to manage that stress early on in your phases. So that way you can focus on officer safety and the bigger things while you're actually sitting at a call, dealing with the call itself.
Yeah, and that reminded me of a story. I had one time, actually I had a few times, where they would call in bogus calls on the far east side of the city, where the robberies actually happen on the far west side. But they both sound legitimate. And so now those same radios, and you're kind of fighting with your partners. You got to be really quick. You got to get your information out because the people on the other side also need the radio because they need to talk as well. So really tough. And actually with our radios, we had a third option. Kind of if you were just have like a normal walkie-talkie, it's only good for maybe, I don't know, half mile or so radius. And so sometimes you have three radios going all at the same time and you have to listen to all of them. You can't miss anything. And you also have to decipher what's not you, like, on your call, and then what is your units. So it can be really, really tough sometimes. And you have to try and keep an even tone. If you're amped up, you're yelling, people they're going to get amped up. Or sometimes the information is miscommunicated or something. I've had that. I've also had the opposite where I was so like calm that they asked like, are you really like in a fight? Like, yep, in a fight. And I just get off the radio and try and handle it. So it's better to be calm, but sometimes that can be misconstrued as well.
Weren't you the one that put out that foot pursuit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a foot pursuit one time.
It was
too.
So calm. I remember that.
Yeah, she was like, "Are you sure?" She asked me. She said, "Are you sure you're in a foot?" Yes, ma'am, I'm sure. Please send me units. I need him over here and over here, and he's running that way with a black shirt and brown hat or whatever.
Yeah, I remember you putting that out, and they were like,
"Were you working that day?"
It doesn't sound like it. Yeah, I was working.
Yeah,
it did not. Like real cool, calm, collected. They're like, "Are you chasing someone? Are you sure?"
Yeah. That just comes with time. Yes. It takes experience. You be in multiple foot pursuits, and you'll get better at it as time goes on. Nobody's perfect day one. Nobody.
Yeah, most definitely. And I had a vehicle pursuit like that once when I was on training, and I remember we're getting on a freeway, and I'm looking at the sign to put it out, and the freeway is gonna go south, and I'm like dead staring at this sign, and then I just put out north. I was like, my Tio's like screaming at me, and I'm like, I remember just staring the sign down, like, got it. Yeah. And then just putting out the exact opposite. Like,
yep.
Your nerves are just so high.
Mm-hmm. It happens. I think I've probably done something similar, or I said I was going the wrong or different street. And that's the other thing too. You have got to learn at least your major streets and then the secondary streets off of that. You have got to learn that. It's really tough. Like, you got to get a GPS built in, basically. And that's just time. You just got to drive, check the street signs as you're going about. So when you do get into that vehicle pursuit, you know what you're talking about. You know which way is north, south, east, west. It's got to be exact. Some of the tertiary streets or the really small streets, those are tough, especially, depending on how big of an area you have to cover is, those can be tough. That could take years to learn all of those. And then the thing is too, even when you use some of those, like the small ones, like say you're spot on, you're like, oh yeah, I studied this one, I remember it. These super small streets, a lot of times your partners don't know them. So you put out these really small streets. I'm going east over here, and everyone's like, man, he sounds good, but I have no idea where that is. And they have to look it up themselves. So yeah, you got to learn radio and where you are, especially in a vehicle pursuit.
One of the next bigger things that people have difficulties on is interviewing. You arrive somewhere, someone called 911, whatever it may be, they're in distress, and they're just going to unload all of this information on you the second you show up. They don't really know what you need. They don't know what the elements of the crime are, kind of like we talked about in the last episode. You got to get there, decipher through all this information and figure out, is there even a crime? And so with these people, they just unload everything that just happened. And they're panicking and they're in stress, and some of them cry and some of them yell. And now we have to get there. We have to be cool, calm, and collect. And we have to somehow decipher from, this incident started at noon. And by, 12:15, she called the police. All 15 minutes of that, we needed to get into every single minute of detail. Now, how do we get all that when these people are, in this state of mind? So it can be a real big challenge, especially when you're new. And what you find is a lot of trainees have difficulty telling people what they need, or trying to control the situation, or even just moving them to sit down or calm down in some way. And if you don't control it, then now, kind of like how we talked about on the radio, sometimes seconds matter. So if this is a crime where the suspect left, we don't really have time to sit here and wait and wait and wait and wait. And then we don't even know if we have a crime yet. So sometimes it's important to get there, control it as quickly as possible, and get out that information as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and let me just walk you guys through a quick scenario. So let's say you, the viewer, right, are placing a 911 call. Let's say you saw someone outside of your home. They seem like a little off, maybe either some mental health or drug issues or something, and you just want an officer to come by and come talk to him, make sure he's okay. So you place that call, you hang up. But before the officer gets there, he goes around the back of your house and starts to, break in, like kick in the back door. So you run out the front door. Officer just happens to show up. You run up to him and you tell him he's breaking in. And he's breaking in. Now, what you have to remember from a new officer perspective, as well as, even veterans like us, or I should say, super veterans, but we have a few years on. We show up expecting to see some guy walking or trespassing or something. And then all we know is, let's say a female runs up to us and says, he's breaking in. Who is breaking in to what? From the caller's perspective, it makes total sense. But to us, we don't know what's going on. We missed all that. So it's difficult. Try to articulate, I'm the homeowner. You know that. I don't know that. He's breaking in, like kicking in the back door to your house. That's another thing we don't know. So sometimes it's very difficult to ascertain what is happening in those crucial seconds, because we're missing some of that information that you have that we just don't, because stuff happens in a few seconds or even minutes.
When you talk to the dispatchers, a lot of the information that you may say may be summarized into one or two sentences. So we get there with, little to no knowledge, and then you talk to us like we have an idea of what's going on. And so it is important. Obviously, we need to address the person breaking in, but after the fact, we have to kind of slow it all back down real slow and just go through every little detail. So have some patience with us sometimes. Right. It's kind of like you said, like it makes sense to you because you were there and you saw it. But now I have to paint that picture in my head. I have to get there and I have to try to understand exactly what it is that you're talking about. So like just one thing, we had a interview recently where there was a fight and this guy is telling us that his employer punched him. And so he pretty much like explains that he's sitting at this countertop eating his lunch. And the countertop is a big island. And at some point, the boss starts arguing with him and he comes and he like grabs him from the front and starts shaking. And I was like, okay. And one of my questions is like, well, how is he shaking you if you're in a stool, like pressed up against this countertop eating? And then he's like, oh, well, I got up, obviously. Like, well, it's not obvious, right? Because the way that I'm painting this picture is, well, you're just sitting here eating your sandwich, and now all of a sudden there's a guy in front of you, which is impossible because there's a countertop. So like those details are really, really like slow and methodical, and like we're gonna get into everything. So like, okay, when did you stand up? When did you face him? Like, how does all of this happen? The details really do matter. It makes sense in your head because you were there, and those little things that maybe don't seem important to you are important to us. So like we're going to go through a lot of these things, and some of it is fluff. And so we may get to this fluff and decide that it isn't relevant for the police report, but it's a lot of things that I still want to know so that way I can cover my whole entire scenario. And then when I have to explain it because I arrested someone, then I know exactly what happened, why it happened, and how I have legitimate probable cause. Yeah, the interviewing process, it takes a while to learn, but once you get it down, it makes sense. It's kind of like just like you're talking to your friend, right? They're telling you a story, and if something doesn't seem right, then ask them, right? If there's a hole, then fill that hole. And if they can't fill the hole, then maybe they're not telling the truth, right? So we kind of can find those indicators. You don't need to be a pro or even really have a lot of time on to tell if someone's lying. Like just conversing with people throughout your life, it's pretty obvious to tell. So
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of times, like people will come up to us and they'll start talking to us. And one of my first questions a lot of times is, well, who are you? And then they kind of get frustrated with me, and they'll say, "Well, obviously I'm the one who called." Well, actually,
right.
it's not obvious because Zach, how many times have you gone to a call? Let's just say my trespassing one I was talking about earlier, and you're expecting to see something, and then someone else completely unrelated to your call that you're working on runs up to you and decides to tell you all this information about something completely unrelated.
Yeah, all the time.
All the time, right? So it's really not obvious. And you brought up a great point where a lot of times the victims or witnesses, they will fill in gaps in their head of the story because it makes sense to them. They were there, they saw the whole thing. But those little details will matter sometimes. And sometimes people get into too much detail, which is good and bad, you know. Sometimes they'll just start telling me their whole life story of like, oh well, 8 years ago. I'm like, okay, hold on, hold on. You said somebody was breaking in. Let's get to the meat and potatoes here. We'll get to the fine details later. You know, who that person is, your relationship does matter. You know, if you've been married 8 years, okay, that makes a huge difference if you go into a domestic violence case. So it's like stuff like that. So sometimes you have to speed it up, sometimes you slow it down. Also, another huge thing, how many times, you know, these events that we go to, when people are calling 911, they're not calling because they had a good day or they want to talk about something. They're having like an extremely traumatic event a lot of times, and they're at a 10. And rightfully so, because they just got, you know, robbed of their phone or something, or a chain snatch, you know, like a gold chain to get ripped off. So you, as you come up to them, you got to meet them at like a 2. You know, if you're at a 10 with them, you both just amp it up. The information's flying. You're just going to miss everything. If you can come at them like a 1 or a 2, they're at a 10, try and tell, you know, you can see their, you know, your presence, breathe, and you can meet them at like a 5, and then you can get the information out. So that's a technique that I learned. That comes with time. That's pretty tough to do, I think, especially in the beginning. But and it's really tough for the public to be able to just come down like that because it is traumatic and it's tough.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that we can try to relate to you guys is control the conversation, control the person, and you don't have to be rude or anything. Sometimes, like I said, just helping them breathe a little bit, helping them maybe have them sit down. What I found too is a lot of the times when you get there, they want you to go catch the bad guy right now. Like, why are you not already in my backyard, or why are you not already out looking for this person? And so sometimes that reassurance of like, well, I have all these units, and it kind of goes back to that radio traffic of like, I already coordinated all these people. I have 10 units out looking, but my job is now to come speak with you and determine if a crime occurred and get whatever information that maybe wasn't relayed over the phone and get that out to them. sometimes that reassurance, I think, helps calm them down too, of just somebody is out there, I have a helicopter on the way or units on the ground, whatever it may be, just somebody is looking, I promise. And sometimes that just calms them down. Like, now we have the time in their mind to just go through this and slow it down a lot, because now we need to, again, go minute by minute. So yeah, I've had that a whole lot where, yeah, you show up and they could act a million different ways, but a lot of the times they're going to be at a 10, like you said, and now it's your job to bring them back down to earth, right? This is like the most traumatic thing that's happened to them. And to us, this is just another call, right?
Yeah, it's a Tuesday.
Right. We just showed up. Like, this is not our first call of the night. We've probably dealt with something even worse tonight. And not to minimize what you've been through, but there's a reason why we're probably going to act the way we are, because we've seen worse, right? And so we can get there and we can remain calm during these incidents, and we have that experience. And so sometimes it takes us realizing, like, we have to be human too and try to calm them back down. And we want to go as soon as we get there, but usually taking that extra minute to just really bring them back down, it does help, and you're going to get a much higher level of cooperation throughout your interview. So,
right. I think I see a lot of, because you mentioned how people are asking, like, why aren't you going doing something right now? And I think I see that the most with missing kids or with like elderly grandparents that maybe have like Alzheimer's or something, and they've been, missing from their home. Why aren't you looking for them right now? And I have to tell them, I'm just one of 4 people assigned to this call right now. My partners are trust me, they're looking. They got 3 of them out there. They're checking the parks, they're checking the shopping plazas and so on. I need you to just focus with me right now, just me and you, and tell me the information I need. What clothing were they wearing? What color was it? What's their height and weight? Do they have any frequent places they go to? Stuff like that. And then once you tell me, I can get on that radio. I can tell my partners, hey, this park is his favorite. He has a red bicycle. Okay, got it. So then the partners are looking for that. So yeah, I just wanted to touch upon that.
no, and you're absolutely right. What comes with interviewing is note taking. A lot of people write really, really bad, or they take bad notes, or they take notes, but they're not legible. So if you're going to go to a call, typically the structure that I try to go through is I speak with them first. I figure out what happened, kind of get a general idea if a crime occurred and what occurred. Then I kind of walk them through, again, like I said, if this happened at noon and she called at 12:15, then I'm going to walk them through those 15 minutes, get a really good idea of what crime occurred every single minute. And then once I'm satisfied, I have all the answers, then I start taking notes, and then I'll read it back to them. Like, if Tyler here tells me from 12 to 12:15 that he was punched and he was sitting at that bar stool and he was eating, and then his boss came and punched him because they were arguing about money, then I'm going to go through all 15 minutes. We're going to talk about step by step what happened. And then once I'm satisfied, then I'm going to go through it with him and take notes during my feedback. That's just me telling him, okay, so you were eating lunch, and while you're eating lunch, your boss came in the kitchen. Yes. Okay, cool. Write that down. Your boss says something about the finances, and so you get very defensive. You guys argue about this money, right? And he's like, yes. During this argument, while you're eating, he comes around the bar, and you stand up to face him because it looks like he's aggressive. Yes. Cool. Again, taking those notes. Then you stand up, he gets a little closer, and he punches you one time. Yes. Cool. So now I know from 12 to 12:15, this is exactly what happened. And then after he punched you, you ran out of the room and you called us. Yes. Cool. So I took bullet points. I have maybe 5 or 6 notes. Granted, this is a short incident, but that would cover my report writing later on. That helps you, because otherwise what happens is if you start right away, like I walk up to Tyler, I'm like, what happened? And he's at a 10 and he just starts yelling about any and everything about his boss. And I start taking notes. Now my notes are all scattered. And sometimes they remember things after the fact, like, oh, well, he had to turn around from the bar and stand up, but we didn't cover that initially. So now maybe I have to kind of fit notes in little areas where I normally don't write notes. And now my notes are real sloppy. So the notes don't need to be taken right away. One of the biggest things that you'll see with the with the trainees is they just like to get right into the notes to kind of like avoid that eye contact, to avoid the conversation, and to just kind of listen and note take. But it's really important that you just engage. And a lot of the times that kind of helps bring them back down too, is because it seems like you're sitting there listening and you genuinely care and you're asking these questions because you want to help them. And if you're just buried in the notes, then it's not very personable. So I think it is important. Get there, figure out what you have first. The note taking will come probably towards the end once you've like set in stone everything that you can. And then make sure that they're legible and they're somewhat organized so that way you can refer to them later and you have a good chronological timeline of what happened from the beginning to the end of this incident.
Yeah, super important, because the note taking translates to your report, which translates to the courtroom with the prosecutor, which translates to the a trial if it goes that far, and then eventually a sentencing. So it all, and you're going to be on the stand too, by the way, so your notes are going to be what you're going to hang from, or, you can praise them or whatever from the testimony you're going to give. But yeah, no, I think note taking is huge, really huge. And especially, I don't think people usually get too upset if you're taking notes while you're talking to them. However, I always prefer to take notes afterwards, so I could maintain that eye contact that you're talking about. And so people understood, or they had a feeling that I was engaged 100%. My undivided attention was on you. What happened? Talk to me. And then, I can get the main details out to my partners on the radio or whatever. And then I can get more into those fine details later, because I know down the line what I'm going to have to do with my report and at court.
Yeah, it really does help. And just one more thing on that engagement, I think it helps you retain it a hell of a lot better too, because eventually you really don't even take, at least for me, I don't take a ton of notes. I can pretty much just sit there, and by the time I walk away, I've already gone over this story like 4 or 5 times with you. So like, you've told me, we filled in all the gaps. You've told me again with all those gaps filled, and then I've repeated it all to you with those gaps filled. And now I have a pretty good idea. And if there's something important, like a quote or maybe an exact number of times that someone was punched or kicked or, etc., then those notes would probably get down, just that way I have real basics on those quantities. But outside of that, like, by the end, I'm pretty confident. Like, I have a good idea of what happened. With the engagement too, it does help. Anything that breaks it sometimes can throw people off. So just you getting on the radio sometimes kind of breaks that cycle of interview and already kind of throws these people off. So anything you can do to just keep the conversation engaged and keep it flowing, it really does help, especially on like crimes where time matters and you can't sit there for 45 minutes doing an interview. On some crimes, you got to get there and get out in 10 minutes. That way you can go join your unit. So
yeah, sometimes I remember, this happens all the time actually, is when you're just starting your shift and, your supervisor tells you, just go, just go out. We got so many calls waiting, the public needs us, just go. And so you end up going to a call and you find the victim or whoever the main person is, and you got a little bit of information based on, what the call is showing on the computer, but you're going to have to play catch up. And that's kind of tough sometimes. I guess back to interviewing. We talked about that a little bit. Some people get frustrated with me. Like, I already told 3 of your partners a story. I'm like, I know, but I just got here. My shift just started. I want to help. Just, give it to me quick, and I'll try and help you as best I can. And usually they'll understand that.
Yeah, 100%. And again, it kind of goes back to that explanation sometimes of just telling people, like, you know what, you did tell them and they were able to get all that information out to us, but I'm going to be the one actually investigating. And so I do need a little more information. I know it gets frustrating, but that kind of reassurance, like, I'm going to be the one doing your report and the investigation, like, all the details that I ask are just as important. So I know it does get frustrating. You did explain it to the dispatcher and all these other people that showed up before me, but I'm here now and I really need it too. So yeah, it definitely gets frustrating, but it helps because if we get that information out right away to those initial units, then a lot of the times they can find people. So as frustrating as it is, like, work with us, you know?
Yeah, I think that comes back to how I was talking about, like, our perception of like what we're walking into, and then your perception, talking like public in general.
Right.
It can be very different sometimes. So just bear with us at times. Let's get into some searching. I think that's a huge component, especially if you're going to be going out to patrol soon. Never, ever rush a search. Maybe rush handcuffing sometimes, get handcuffs on quick. That could be important. But as far as the search goes, yeah, don't rush it. I have been a part of calls where one of my partners said, "Yep, I searched him. He's good." He hands him off to me, and I find a knife. Granted, I think that was only maybe once or twice that's happened. Super rare, but it does happen. Whether you're busy, it's a hot call, whatever the circumstances might be, and you just miss it, or it's a small knife. It was a small one, only maybe 2 inches or so. But I've heard of people missing guns. There's videos out on YouTube. You can find them. There was one, I think it was San Diego. He started shooting at the cops from the back seat of the patrol car at the station. So it happens. But try not to let that be you. And if you do make that mistake, don't get me wrong. I'm not like condoning it or just don't make it twice. Okay. I've made mistakes. I'm sure Zach has made a bunch of mistakes. But the only thing worse than making a mistake is doing it twice. So learn from them and move on.
Yeah. Yeah. What he said, you can't rush a search ever, 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 ever. If you aren't sure or you don't remember if you searched a place, start over. One of the biggest safety concerns, especially on training, is we try to rush it and we try to get it done as quick as possible. And then, okay, sir, he's ready. No, it's not going to fly. If we're standing there watching you, you're going to search him again. And if I'm still not satisfied, then I'm not going to let it go. I'm going to search him at that point. So, and it's like he said, partner to partner. Sometimes we hand people off. Sometimes we're not entirely sure. And so we kind of let them know, I'm pretty sure someone searched him. Just do it again. There's no harm, no foul. Once someone is arrested and we're moving them from car to car or from facility to facility, whatever it is, they should be searched every single time. When we take someone to the hospital, we take them out of the car, we take them into the hospital, whatever the reason may be. When we take them back into the car, even though they were searched 3 times before, we search them before they go back in the car. It doesn't matter. Then before they go in the jail, search them again. And so on and so forth. So these people get searched quite a bit before they're actually unhandcuffed and released into the jail. And it's important because, like you said, sometimes small things are missed. Sometimes they put things where things shouldn't be. Sometimes we don't check shoes and there's things in shoes or socks. And we kind of just get lazy in our habits and we're like, there's nothing in the shoe. So it is important. Check it. There's no rush when it comes to any sort of search. We will rush you on the back end for your paperwork and all sorts of other things and, your reports and things that can be cleaned up and are not going to get us killed. We can rush those a little bit.
Yeah. And that reminds me of one time I was, I was probably about 2 years in. So I was still pretty new, but, I cut my teeth. I knew what I was doing, for the most part. And it was 4 of us. And we were just grabbing a drink from like a 7-Eleven. It was like 1 a.m. or something. And this car comes flying past. And so we all see it. None of us say a word to each other. We all jump in the cars and we go. It was two-man cars, right? So we pull over the car. It's just one guy. He's just driving by himself. And so there's 4 of us. So we each take, it's a 4-door sedan. So we each take a door. And so I was at I would say the front on the passenger side. And I was looking at the seat, just seeing, because it's dark, really dark. And, he had tinted windows. We had him roll down the windows. Anyways, so my partner behind me is telling the officer at the driver door, because he was asking the guy to step out of the car. He kept saying, like, hey, and like trying to like get his attention, like there's something he should be aware of without letting the driver know that he was aware of it, if that makes sense. And so I'm looking, I got my flashlight, I'm looking. He keeps saying like, hey, I'm like, what does he see? So finally, he runs around the car. He runs around. And so the officer, the driver who's got the hands on the officer that has the hands on the driver, He's like, yeah, I got it, dude. I got it. And he's like, no, you don't. And he runs in, like bump checks him, shoulder checks him out of the way, grabs his hands, handcuffs the guy really quick, and then pulls the gun out of his waistband that he saw. Only one cop saw it out of four of us. So, man, it could be dangerous sometimes, you know, even with four,
Yeah.
and none of us were new. Well, newish. I would say maybe I was the newest guy there at 2 years, between 2 and 5. But it happens. Sometimes you just don't see it. It's dark. Maybe it's just the right angle. You had a hoodie on like this, and it was kind of covering it a little bit. And we all were like, wow, that could have been bad. Not that he was like lackadaisical about it or anything, but he wasn't getting the gravity of it because he didn't see it. So never rush and always assume there's a gun on someone. Always. If you assume and there's not one, whatever. No big deal. But if you assume the other way and you're wrong, ooh, that's different. Can't do that. That's how people get hurt.
All right. Next, we'll get into time management. One of the biggest things, a lot of standing around. There's always something to do. There's always something you should be doing. And if by some stretch of the imagination you run out of things to do, you should probably be studying, right? There's always something else that you need to learn, something else that you need to start practicing. And even if it's just the radio, go talk to yourself in the car. I don't care, but find something else to do, find something else to study. And if you have reports, start on a report, whatever it may be. But time management is probably one of the most crucial things in your early phases of training, that a lot of people waste time on things that don't matter. We just sit around, or we spend too much time looking something up that doesn't need to be looked up, whatever it may be. So if you have a question, obviously try to figure some things out on your own, but at some point you're going to get stuck, and you're going to waste 15 minutes just stuck when you could just ask us a simple question. So sometimes if you do the research on your own and you just can't find an answer, then maybe that's when you need to ask questions. Asking questions isn't that big of a deal. That's one thing that I always tell my trainees is ask questions, please, for the love of God. That's why I'm here. Ask questions and I'll happily answer it. If you can figure out something on your own, even better. But at some point you get stuck and then you're just wasting both of our time. So we have things to do. Don't rush a search, but on these other things where we can make up time, we need to make up the time. So time management is one of those things you have to start learning really, really quick on patrol.
Absolutely have to do that. No question about it. Because sometimes, like, I knew so many times, like, our shifts were 8 hours. Departments will vary, but ours were 8. I've heard of people many times arresting someone an hour after their second shift of the day. And that's when time management's really going to come in. You have got to be really efficient, because you can get into 20, 22-hour shifts quickly. And if you've got to spend time looking up stuff constantly because you don't remember it, yeah, you're just making your life harder on yourself and your training officer too. Even 5 years off of training, I was still looking stuff up. Not every day, but what was that section again? How does it read? Like, what's the wording? That happened to me. I'm sure Zach does it all the time too. On those more niche cases, but your run-of-the-mill vandalisms or property crimes, yeah, you should know those. Yeah, you shouldn't be spending much time looking that up.
Yeah, and even if you do need to look it up for those real basics like vandalism, you should know exactly what section it is by now, how to find it real quick, and then it should just be a quick reminder, if you will, versus like an in-depth, I haven't really had, this sort of animal abuse type call in a while. Let me look into the penal code, and maybe there's a little more research that goes into it, exactly what section and what elements. And for most of these like basic routine things, yeah, if you need to look it up, it should be quick. It should be a skim. It should be more of a reminder than a new thing being learned. So, and that you also have calls pending. So we don't have time to sit here at a report call or something basic and spend all of this time. There's other calls waiting. Just like he kind of mentioned, sometimes we start our shift and we're already down a bunch of calls and we got to cycle through them. They've already been holding for a while. We need to go and we need to get them done now. So time management is important in our sense, like, for my sanity, but also the public needs their calls addressed. So we need to get on it. And at any moment, something more important could come out, and we may have to drop everything and run to that. And so now, like, that workload that we had doesn't just go away. Now we have to go deal with this, whatever more severe crime that came out, and then go back and still deal with everything else. And if we get something, heinous, then that may take us a while to deal with. And now those 8 hours get real short, real quick. So we have to figure out how to get there, be effective, do everything that we need to do, and move on.
Yeah, we remember we'd call those shift killers. Especially anything with a child. Like if you got that hour one, that's probably it. That's going to be the majority of your shift. You're going to be tied up. You're going to be interviewing everyone 3 times, making notifications, very detailed report. Your note taking is going to have to be on point. All these things we were talking about. The higher the level of crime, the more detailed things have to be, and the better you need to be doing it. It's not just another, smash and grab out of a car and they stole my laptop. Those, are pretty straightforward. I came back to my car, the window was broken, laptop was gone. Got it. But especially with a child, yeah, you better have every I dotted and T crossed. Everything's got to be just right.
All right. Any last thoughts before we start wrapping up, and then we'll kind of touch on what next week will look like?
I was just thinking about that while you're saying it. I don't think so. I think we hit it.
Okay. So next week, obviously, patrol training is a very, very big topic. There's a whole lot to go into. We only touched on some of it, some of the real early phase stuff for this week. Next week, we're looking at covering things in the later phases, like driving, kind of some of the struggles of having multiple FTOs at this point, or field training officers. There are different styles and so on and so forth. What use of force looks like for new trainees. The trauma of just going to all these different calls, and then eventually learning how to be efficient as a solo officer and handle yourself in that manner.
Yep, all that. There's a lot to talk about in there, and we'll get into it next week.
And if there's anything else you guys are curious about, feel free to let us know, and we may be able to cover it, or even in a future episode. And if you guys are curious about pre-employment or the academy, then check out last week's episode, because we covered pretty much anything hiring process-wise and some of the basics in the academy and what's covered in there.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, sounds good to me. We'll see you guys next week.
All right.